Imagine you're walking through, like, a vast, prestigious museum.
Mm.
You turn a corner, you move away from the main exhibits, and you find this solitary pedestal.
Right.
And it's dramatically spotlighted, cordoned off by heavy velvet ropes.
Hmm.
So you naturally step closer.
Because you're expecting some grand artifact.
Exactly. Because of the way it's presented, you expect to see some massive, complex piece of human progress. Like a huge assembly of brass gears, tangled wires, heavy iron levers, something really visual.
Something tangible that proves a massive leap in technology actually happened.
Yeah. But sitting there, resting on the center of this velvet cushion, is just a tiny, torn scrap of paper. And written on it are exactly 8 words. The signal and the sorrow. Samuel Morse's invention.
It's so striking.
It is. And beneath that title is a brief note about a 5-minute interview with a woman who's an expert on Morse, followed by a simple promise. It just says the story of how he invented it. That is the entirety of the exhibit.
It completely subverts how we usually look at historical technology. I mean, there are no schematics.
Yeah.
No dates, no maps, no technical breakdowns of electrical currents. It's just a highly charged, deeply emotional pairing of words.
Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are listening to this right now, you are joining us for a really personalized, focused exploration. Our mission today is to take that minimalist scrap of a source text, this specific fragment about that 5-minute interview, and figure out what those words actually reveal.
Because it promises us a story of innovation, but it strips away all the technical stuff.
Exactly. It offers a profound thematic framework instead. We're going to look closely at what these few specific words expose about the creation of technology, the burden of legacy, and honestly, the human condition.
When a historical text distills an entire technological revolution down to a single phrase like that, we have to treat those words as deliberate choices.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this and start right with that title, The Signal and the Sorrow. I'll be honest, my first instinct when I read that is to be, well, a little skeptical.
Sure, yeah.
Because when we think about major leaps in communication, the standard framing is triumphant. It's about progress, conquering physical distance.
Human mastery over nature.
Exactly. Tying a massive leap in communication so explicitly to sadness feels, I don't know, almost melodramatic. It's like titling a book about the invention of the wheel, the rotation and the regret.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. Like, why would a leap in technology be so explicitly tied to sadness? Is it just a biographer trying to inject drama into a story about copper wire?
Well, what's fascinating here is the actual history behind it, which that 5-minute interview touches on. It goes far beyond just trying to sell a compelling story.
Okay, so what's the actual story then?
Well, let's look at who Samuel Morse actually was before the invention. Most people don't know this, but he was actually a highly successful portrait painter.
Wait, really? A painter?
Yeah, he wasn't some lifelong engineer. Back in 1825, he was in Washington, D.C., working on this massive, prestigious commission to paint the Marquis de Lafayette.
Oh, wow. That is a huge deal.
It was. But while he was in D.C., his wife was back home in New Haven, Connecticut. She was pregnant, and she suddenly fell very ill.
Oh, no. And they had no way to communicate quickly.
Right. Back then, a signal was a letter carried by a horse. So her father wrote to Morse to tell him she was sick. But by the time that letter reached D.C., she had already passed away.
Oh, that is devastating.
It gets worse, actually. Morse immediately dropped his brushes, packed up, and rushed back to Connecticut. But the travel took so long that by the time he got home, she had already been buried. He missed her funeral.
Wow. He didn't even get to say goodbye.
Exactly. And that is the literal sorrow the title refers to. He was completely gutted by the fact that he was so isolated from his own family. That grief, that agonizing isolation became the direct catalyst for the invention.
So it wasn't about making a faster mail system for businesses.
No, not at all. He basically vowed to engineer a reality where that specific pain, being unaware of a loved one's tragedy because of physical distance, could never happen again.
That completely changes the context. The signal is literally a cure for the sorrow.
Right. A signal, at its core, is an imposition of order onto chaos. It's clarity. But it was born directly out of profound grief.
That reframes how we think about the tools we use today. I want you, listening right now, to consider the devices surrounding you, the smartphone on your desk, the messaging apps, the global networks.
We just take them for granted, you know?
We really do. We interact with them as cold, efficient utilities. But if we apply the logic of this text, behind that cold efficiency is often a very human, sometimes painful story of attempting to solve a problem.
Yeah.
Somebody was hurting or frightened by the physical distance between themselves and the people they cared about.
And they built a technological bridge to eliminate that fear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But let's look at the actual promise made in the text.
Yeah.
It promises the story of how he invented it, but it leaves the deeper consequences blank for us to infer from the title. And honestly, my mind immediately jumps to the inverse conclusion.
What do you mean?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. We've been assuming that the sorrow came first, that the grief was the catalyst. But wait, could it be the other way around?
You're saying the sorrow could be the result?
Yeah. Could the sorrow actually be the result of the invention rather than the cause? Like a technology meant to help that brought unforeseen negative consequences. We always celebrate innovation, but could Morse's creation have changed the world in a way that ultimately caused society grief?
This raises an important question. It really does. If we examine the mechanics of what instantaneous communication actually did to society, your theory is spot on.
Because before the telegraph, distance provided a physical insulation against information, right?
Precisely. Information was physically tethered to human travel. The speed of news was limited by the speed of a horse, or a train, or a ship.
Which means you had a mandatory emotional buffer.
Exactly. If a tragedy occurred in another city, it might be days or weeks before you found out. That delay wasn't just an inconvenience, you know? It functioned as a psychological insulator. It paced the delivery of human experience.
Let's ground that in a physical mechanism. Imagine you're living in a house at the end of a very long, winding driveway.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Before the signal, getting bad news was like watching someone slowly walk up that driveway for 3 weeks. You don't know what they're going to say, but you have time to prepare your mind. You can brace your defenses.
You adjust to the possibility of something changing.
Right. But instantaneous communication is like having an uninvited guest suddenly kick down your front door at midnight and scream the tragedy directly into your face. There's no preparation. The signal strips away the driveway entirely.
That is exactly the cognitive shift that happened. And there are some really interesting facts from that era that back this up. When the telegraph first started spreading, people were actually terrified of receiving telegrams.
Wait, really? They were scared of him?
Oh, absolutely. Because in the early days, nobody paid by the word to send casual gossip. You only used it for emergencies. So if a telegram arrived at your house, it almost universally meant someone was dead or dying.
Oh, wow. So just the sound of a messenger at the door would cause a panic attack?
Yes. Human nervous systems evolved to process immediate local threats. We were not cognitively equipped to process distant tragedies instantaneously. The signal delivered sorrow at a velocity the human mind had never experienced before.
It highlights the dual-edged nature of any major technological leap. You invent a mechanism to connect people, and by doing so, you expose them to each other's pain without any friction.
Every time we upgrade our signaling capabilities from telegraph wires to modern social media, we increase our daily, unbuffered exposure to sorrow.
It really makes you wonder about Morse's perspective later in his life. Did he see this world-changing network and realize he had fundamentally altered the peace of mind of the human race?
Which naturally leads us to the third major component of our source text. Let's look closely at how it defines his relationship to his work. It specifically says, Samuel Morse's invention.
Singular. So what does this all mean? That really stands out to me. Just one invention. Not his inventions, not his art or his life. It specifically highlights his invention singular.
It takes his entire existence and hyper-focuses it down to a single creation.
It implies he is defined by this one thing. It's like a musician who is only remembered for a single massive hit song. You know, did the weight of this one signal overshadow everything else he did in his life?
It absolutely did. Like we mentioned earlier, he was a renowned painter. He founded the National Academy of Design. He ran for mayor of New York. He was a deeply complex, multifaceted person.
But nobody knows that. I had no idea he was a painter until today.
Right. History is ruthlessly efficient. It strips away the nuances, the side projects, the failures, and distills decades of lived experience into a single focal point. And the text's pairing of that one invention with sorrow suggests that the singular achievement became a burdensome narrative.
Because his entire humanity was eclipsed by his utility.
Exactly. To be flattened by history into a single concept is a unique form of erasure. You cease to be a complex person with a grieving heart, and you just become the Morse code guy. Forever.
That is a profound loss. I want the listener to really internalize this. When you are studying any historical figure, remember that reducing them to their one big thing might capture their greatest signal, but it obscures the broader sorrows, the struggles, and the actual nuances of their real life.
We want the quick story of the invention. We rarely have the patience for the messy reality of the inventor's daily life.
Which is exactly why doing a deep dive like this is so valuable. We took a tiny fragment of a source, a title like The Signal and the Sorrow and the Promise of a Story, and it completely reframed how we think about technological progress.
It really reminds us that innovation is a deeply emotional, human endeavor.
It is. It's not just cold gears and wires. It's driven by grief, it alters our psychology, and it can trap its creator in a singular legacy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Yeah, please.
Think about the communication signals you send and receive every single day. The texts, the video calls, the constant notifications. What if the most profound innovations in human connection are always, fundamentally, just attempts to cure our own inherent sorrow of isolation?
Wow.
And by stripping away every physical barrier between us, are we actually curing that sorrow or just building faster machines to expose ourselves to it?
That is a lot to think about the next time a notification lights up your phone. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We really appreciate you tuning in. Keep questioning the hidden stories behind the signals in your own world.